Between 1949 and 1952, Astrinidis produced just one work a year. Excessive work tours on the side of musicians like Villepons, Scherin, Sac-Dubon, Michelin didn't leave him time for more than one. In 1950, his symphonic poem, The Castle of Loneliness, of Solitude, was a huge success in France, performed in Théâtre des Champs-Élysées and broadcasted live from the French National Radio. In 1951, a year later, he composes the Masque of the Red Death, quite in a frenzy. In between concerts, he finished it just in 20 days. Can you imagine a work of such complexity just in 20 days? And this is the point where this question pops up. Why so fast? Why such a hurry? I have the feeling that this pressure came from within. This is not the first time that Astrinidis writes something revolving around death. And if we look at the main theme that Astrinidis wrote for the death, let's call it the death's leitmotif, we might find the answer.
The Masque of the Red Death of Nicolas Astrinidis is based on the short story of the same name by the American writer Edgar Allan Poe. The story follows Prince Prospero's attempts to avoid a dangerous plague known as the Red Death. The work is often analyzed as an allegory about the inevitability of death, and like many of Poe's tales, The Masque of the Red Death has been interpreted autobiographically by some. In this point of view, Prince Prospero is Poe, and the disease may have been inspired by tuberculosis, since Poe's wife Virginia was suffering from the disease at the time the story was written. Like the character Prince Prospero, Poe tried to ignore the terminal nature of the disease. Astrinidis' choreographic poem, The Masque of the Red Death for Orchestra, was composed in Paris in November 1951, but it premiered 18 years later in 1969 in Athens by the Symphonic Orchestra of the Greek National Radio Foundation.
Many previous works of Astrinidis, I'm talking about this period, revolve around death. One of the Trois Melodies, the cantata La Passion de Siva, the two songs Angoisse and Les Papillons, and it is like a hint of death in every single piece, and this spread out over a decade. Even more interesting, the work after The Masque of the Red Death, written a year later, has almost the same musical theme in it. I am talking about the concert variations for piano and orchestra. There we hear and so on. But what happened during this decade? And he writes so many works revolving around death. the answer is simple: the Second World War. Whether he realized it or not, his work was influenced by it. With the Masque of the Red Death, he reflects on these years, but in my eyes, he is exactly the opposite of Prince Prospero. Prospero shied away from death, and Astrinidis faced death head on and fought in the army during the war. Prior to this day, together with the pianist Nils Basters, we prepared the scene from the Masque of the Red Death, the scene where Prince Prospero meets the death. Everything that Nils is going to play represents the castle, the joyous atmosphere of the ball, and Prince Prospero himself. And everything that I am going to play represents the death. I am, let's say, going to play the theme of death. Using archetypal elements like the number 3, death interrupts the flow 3 times, with the 3rd time leading to the big confrontation. I'm playing once more the theme of death. So, let's listen to the scene. The violinist Coyte, who was playing at the time with Astrinidis, said about him that he was always joyful, easygoing, and most important, I think, at peace with himself. Astrinidis, in an interview in the 90s, he said that many view death as a tragic event, others as a liberation, but he chooses not to think about it at all and just stay creative and composed. And I don't know, maybe that's the secret. Try not to avoid it, come at peace with it, and to make the most out of life.
And now was acknowledged the presence of the Red Death. He had come like a thief in the night, and one by one dropped the revelers in the blood-bedewed halls of their revel and died, each in the despairing posture of his fall. And the life of the ebony clock went out with that of the last of the gay, and the flames of the tripods expired, and darkness and decay and the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all.